And really the focus of this next session is on the future of the River Murray. So we've collected 4 speakers who are going to give you quite an interesting range of perspectives on what's available and what's possible on the future of the River Murray. First of all, Neil Andrew. Neil is the chair of the Murray-Darling Basin Authority. He was an irrigator in the Riverland of South Australia, and in 1975, Newfield Scholar in Agriculture prior to being elected to the Federal Parliament in 1983. He was Speaker of the House of Representatives from 1998 to 2004 and Chief Government Whip in 1997. Since then, he has served as National Chair of the Crawford Fund and was a Commissioner on the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research. He has chaired reviews of the grains and citrus industries in South Australia and was recently appointed, as I mentioned, the Chair of the Murray-Darling Basin Authority. Today he's speaking with us about the complexities, but also the opportunities of the River Murray Basin. Please welcome Neil Andrew.
Well, thank you, Leanne, fellow panellists and ladies and gentlemen. Jerry Butler was kind enough to phone me about 2 months ago and invite me to be, of all things, a patron of this conference. And as Jerry can vouch, I wasn't an enthusiastic participant. Not because I don't have a commitment to Landcare, but frankly because I thought I'd had too little to do with Landcare, particularly in my post-parliamentary days, and was therefore not sufficiently identified to be as promoting of the conference as I ought to be. When I called Jerry back, I had changed my mind. I was prepared to accept this great honour. Why? 2 reasons. First, when I was federal member for Wakefield, I used to work with Jerry Butler and I had nothing but admiration for the work he was doing, particularly in the Eastern Hills, as part of the NRM and Landcare movements. And I was pleased to find his elevation to chair of Landcare in South Australia. But the second reason I was prepared to be acknowledged as a patron was that I had been in the Parliament with Bruce Lloyd, who was one of the inaugural national chairs of the Landcare movement. And I'm delighted to be here today and have the opportunity to share this platform and this conference with Sue Middleton, who was filling up part of what was Bruce's responsibility. So it's really very much recognition and appreciation of all that Bruce has done and Jerry's done that has me here today. I want to talk to you about the Murray-Darling Basin Authority and the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. And not much that I'm telling you will be new. You're all familiar with the Murray-Darling Basin. It occupies an area the size of Spain and France combined. And the rivers that feed it in the north and the south, and all of the northern water gets into the Murray via the Darling. The rivers that feed it and that supply the River Murray give the River Murray a flow that is 14% that of the Nile, 3% that of the Mississippi, and 0.25% that of the Amazon. Wonder why you live in the second driest continent in the world? That's why. This is our major source of water and it is 0.25% of the flow of the Amazon. The early settlers recognised the great opportunities that came with this river, and so they constructed 100 years ago, just 2 months ago, it was 100 years, they began the construction of a series of locks that turned the Lower Murray Basin basically into a series of lakes. And the first of those locks was at Blanchetown. That's not the Blanchetown lock, but you know the forms that the locks and the weirs all along the river take. And along with the locks, which brought with them the opportunity, of course, for navigation, that was the intent, came the great opportunity for irrigation. And across the basin, people turned to irrigation and principally, as you know, to flood irrigation. And such was the use of water through flood irrigation across the basin that particularly here in South Australia it was proving to be much too extravagant. And so what were open channels and concrete lined open channels in the sandy soils of South Australia across the Riverland turned in the 1970s through government intervention and through assistance from primary producers into pipes, and that meant that we could then go to pressure systems instead of overheads to microjets, all of those things with which you are very familiar. I want to stress the point, and really the point partially that Paul was making in his address. Paul, you don't have to go far to find automated irrigation. Step outside of this institute and I can find you growers who are currently doing that in the Waikerie area. And I have come, for example, the Shepparton area where I've got people with automated flood irrigation systems on lucerne crops. Quite a transformation occurred through the 70s. And then what I want to stress with every audience is the change that occurred that forced us to look again at the way we use this magnificent national resource. Now this is a block graph of the annual inflows, as you can tell, to the River Murray system from 1892 to 2012. I haven't got time to dwell on it now, but you only need to look at the little red lines and you can see the Federation drought from basically 1896 through to 1904. The drought that coincided partially with the Second World War from 1936 through to 1944, and the millennium drought that we have just experienced from 2002 through to 2008 or 10. These are the inflows that have occurred across the system during the entire time that we have been irrigators. And if you look for something significant in all of that, you'll note the blocks that indicate the high flow periods as well. And the most significant of them, the one we're most familiar with as South Australians, is of course in 1956, in the centre of that block graph. And a quick glance and you'll see that that followed a series of high rivers through the 50s, and finally in 55 and 56, which produced such an enormous amount of water. So those who imagine that the problem that we had in South Australia was due solely to the drought are in fact in part wrong. The problem we had was also, the problem we had in South Australia during the drought was due to extractions, and the criticism that we so easily levelled at, for example, Cubby Station, were wrong. The problem we had in South Australia was principally low inflows. It was the drought, not extractions, that caused us the dilemma that we had during that period of time. Now, let me... okay. And the truly significant and important thing to me is that what has happened through the 1900s, particularly from 1950 to 1995, was that the amount of water that we took out of the system went up 4 times. And so the governments of the day decided we've got to do something different. And you'll note that in 2003, we had the Living Murray initiative. That proved to be insufficient. And so in 2012, the Basin plan, for which I'm in part responsible as the chair, was introduced. And we now have a decision that says that under the Basin plan, the extractions in the basin have to be reduced by 2,750 gigalitres if we're to get down to what we believe is a sustainable diversion limit of 10,000, down from 13,800 to 10,600 in order to have a sustainable River Murray Basin. Now, time's going to be against me, but I want to make a couple of other points. People are often critical of governments and say they acted too slowly on all of this. One of the great dilemmas we have is that there was never in the federal constitution any power over water. So water instructions were left entirely with the state governments, and they were as parochial over water as they are over football, as you well know. And it was only finally when then Prime Minister Howard put a bucket of $10 billion on the table, and you know what Prime Minister Keating said about a premier and a bucket of money, that we had all of the states agreeing that they would come together around common legislation about how we deal with water. I want to make one other comment. I'm talking to Landcare, and your great concern has been what do we do with the environment, and rightly so. We should be proud of what has been done by successive governments with salinity. Won't spend any longer on that, but that's a graph of the salinity interception schemes just down the road here, which reduced salinity at Morgan by 30%. And then can I finally say that if we are to take 2,750 gigalitres and no longer divert it for irrigation or other productive purposes, we have to find a way to use it just as efficiently in the environment. So the taxpayers, as part of that $10 billion that I'm currently part of an authority chairing, have said, let's at Chowla divert water by putting in a regulator so we can raise the level artificially and get flooding of the Chowla floodplain. And this is happening, of course, as you know, at Koondrook, Paracuta, less so at Hatter Lakes and at Barmer Forest. And the intention, very important to Landcare, is just by that diversion in normal flows to be able to water the area in Chowla that is indicated by the pale green as compared to the normal flow or minimum inundation with the blue. So what we're saying is there is a capacity to get decent environmental flows out of the 2,750, and the scientific work we've just done and announced last week says that we could even get the effective 2,750 and use even less water if we target our flows. We should be proud of what irrigation has done, proud of the productivity of Australia, but if we are to have a sustainable basin, if we're to be concerned about the environment, this is the way we have to go. It's not popular, but it's essential.
Thank you so much for that. We're going to move now to speak from Sharon Starick. Sharon is the presiding member of the South Australian Murray-Darling Basin Natural Resource Management Board. She's also a presiding member who I've also had the pleasure of working with, both recently and over a number of years, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing from her too. She is a multi-skilled woman. When she's not being the PM for the SA Murray-Darling Basin NRM Board, together with her husband, she runs a 1,500 hectare dryland cropping property and piggery near Cambrai. She also chairs the Rural Business Support for the RAA of South Australia and is involved in the Animal Health Australia. She has over 20 years of involvement in natural resource management and community organisations. This includes water resource management, soil conservation, biodiversity management and pest, animal and plant control. In 2003, Sharon was awarded the Rural Industries Research and Development Corporation Rural Women's Award. Please welcome her to speak with us about a regional approach to the River Murray, and I'm going to take all my paperwork with me.
I'll just move those down a bit. They don't go low enough. That's a bit of a worry. Firstly, it is truly an honour to be presenting to you all today, and particularly talking about something that some areas that I'm really passionate about. That is the River Murray, the region and all that offers in terms of agriculture and food and wine production, but most importantly, the people. So that's just an outline on what I'm going to talk about today. A couple of speakers have already touched on the River Murray is truly the lifeblood of South Australia. It is one of our most precious water resources. We all rely on having a healthy working river in South Australia. As South Australians, we use about 7% of all the water that is used in the basin. We have 1.3 million people reliant on water from the River Murray. That's not only Adelaide, but water goes to the Yorke Peninsula, Barossa, Keith, Eyre Peninsula, just to name a few. In an average year, the River Murray supplies 40% of South Australia's urban water needs. But in a dry year, this can escalate up to 90%. We have a strong regional economy that is underpinned by the River Murray and all that it offers. We have food and wine production, grapes, citrus, almonds, dairy, fish, stone fruit, chicken meat, vegetables, and my favourite, pork. And that doesn't take into consideration dryland farming from our region, which includes cereals, lamb, beef and wool. So why would you want to live anywhere else in our fine state? That equates to $2.2 billion worth of food and wine production from our region alone, and brings in $200 million worth of tourism to the region. The River Murray also supports ecosystems, including river red gums and black box forests, wetlands that are important for water quality, reducing flood impacts, and provide important refuge for many species. We have 3 internationally important wetlands and 14 nationally recognised wetlands. The River Murray is also critical to the beliefs, culture and business needs of all Aboriginal people in the region. There are a number of agreements that give a framework for Aboriginal engagement and for recognising values in water planning. And finally, it is important for our social needs as a community: boating, fishing, camping, relaxing, and one of my favourites, rowing. So if we think about the Basin Plan, it was signed in 2012. It makes clear the obligations on each state and Commonwealth, makes prominent the goal of having a healthy working river, and requires standards to be met by each state. For example, it does have targets around salinity at Morgan, and it is accompanied by significant funding. It also reduces the risk. We know another dry year is going to come, or drought years are going to come again, but through the Basin Plan, we hope that our system will be much more resilient than what it was in the past. It will improve operating rules and improve capacity to meet the health needs of 50 private and public wetlands. So in South Australia, what are we doing? We've been doing stuff for a long time. We've had a cap on water use, which was introduced in the late 60s. More recently, there have been a number of programs, the on-farm irrigation efficiency programs and the SARMS programs. The on-farm irrigation efficiency program has offered irrigators up to $90 million being spent on 380 projects that's been administered by the Natural Resources Management Board. And the SARMS program has offered $265 million with over 160 projects, which has been administered by PIRSA. Both of these programs are about using water more wisely and investing in on-farm and off-farm infrastructure to actually do that. This results in benefits to individual businesses, things like improving the quality of citrus or wine grapes, provides individual irrigators with a greater capacity to manage the precious resource that they have. And as a result of those programs, water has actually been, the water savings or partial amounts of those water savings has gone to the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder. Neil has already talked a bit about the Chowla regulator being built. There's also pike and catfish floodplains in the process of being brought back to life and ecological production, which in turn will result in supporting our tourism, irrigation, fish breeding, cultural heritage, and encouraging and supporting our beautiful wild places. Once again, this is about doing more with the water we have. I've already made mention of the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder. This provides a really important part of the Basin Plan, in that water that is recovered is then able to be delivered and support healthy wetlands and floodplains. To date, South Australia's target is 200 gigalitres, and to date, we've reached the target of 143 gigalitres. There will be a number of changes in terms of the operating rules. So how do we manage the river in a much more dynamic way? And in terms of water allocation plans, we need them to be Basin Plan compliant by 2019. It's not far away. There are significant opportunities in terms of research and development, new crops, but also what is the next generation in terms of irrigation practice. All of these things, though, can't be achieved through individuals or individual organisations alone. This is about individuals, local communities, regional communities, different organisations coming together and supporting one another to find solutions to these problems. So where to from here? What's the future look like? As a state and as a region, we need the Basin Plan to be delivered in full and on time. That is absolutely critical to having a healthy working river. We need to continue to monitor how we're going to, what we're doing in terms of the Basin Plan, and the things that we said we were going to do, are we achieving the results that we actually expected? And the river will be dynamic. We need to better equip ourselves to be able to work within that. As I said earlier, all this can't be done alone. We need the power of one. You all can have an influence. There currently is a Senate inquiry into the Basin Plan. It closes, or submissions close, on the 25th of September. How fantastic would it be if everybody in this room put in a submission? We are at risk because there is pressure from some other communities in some of the other states that the targets within the Basin Plan might be reduced. We all have a voice, we need to use it. So I put a challenge out to you. What are you going to do? This isn't about what the NRM board can do. This also isn't about the Murray-Darling Basin Authority. This isn't about your local council. It is about your local Landcare group. It is about you as an individual. What are you going to do? Thank you.
Okay, I think that was a very active invitation from Sharon to keep being involved and to take note of the submission closing date on the 25th of September. Brendan, I've not yet met Brendan, so I'll have to do that after his presentation. But I've heard about him and I'm very much looking forward to hearing from you. So Brendan Sidhu is the CEO and Director at Jubilee Almonds and Century Orchards, I beg your pardon. He has a strong background in the almond industry. I actually also want to know if he's brought any samples with him today, so that's my little challenge to you, Brendan. He has been involved in the Waikerie-based Jubilee Almonds since 1983, where he has had various roles, ultimately being promoted to CEO. He's also currently Deputy Chair and former Chair of the Almond Board of Australia. He keeps himself busy as Chairman of the National Almond Centre of Excellence, currently being established at the Loxton Research Centre. And these are really exciting initiatives as the Australian almond industry is currently in rapid expansion. I'm looking forward to hearing about Brendan's knowledge of horticultural best practice and the communication that goes with that in the almond growers world. Please welcome Brendan, and I believe he's standing right behind me, so he'll only need to take a step forward.
Thank you very much. I thought I had 5 minutes, and I was told now I've got 10, so I cut a lot of slides out, and unfortunately these two people, speakers before me, I'm going to be repeating a bit of what they say, but here we go anyway. Firstly, welcome to Waikerie. I'm just north-east of Waikerie, so great to see so many people here in Waikerie today. So just a little bit about me. Sorry. Okay, so what do we do? Currently, we operate 2 orchards, one at Overland Corner, it's about 26 kilometres northeast of here, and we have 480 hectares of almonds. We are private water diverters and we apply about 7 gigalitres of water annually. We have a second property at Loxton, called Century Orchards, and we farm 540 hectares of almonds and 100 hectares of wine grapes. I can tell you the board's made a decision, along with me, that we will no longer be wine grape growers by 2017, and we're converting that 100 hectares of wine grapes to another 60 hectares of almonds. So this is a bit of an overview from a irrigator, South Australian irrigator, from my experience with managing the water. South Australian irrigators have been world leaders in water use efficiency. You'll find the bottom end users of most irrigating places, I think you find most efficient use of water. South Australian has had an extraction cap since 1969. In other words, we've had a cap on the amount of water we can extract since 1969. Now, here comes a pretty big statement. I think the River Murray is being managed well. Excuse me. In fact, I think it's one of the best managed river systems in the world. Now, that is a big statement. However, I can tell you now, from what's happening in California, they're the largest growers of almonds in the world. They're going through a severe drought. We have a lot of those Californians that are coming here talking to the MDBA about how they can manage their water better. They are talking to us as growers, and growers are coming to talk to us about asking us, how do we get through the drought? How do we apply the water more efficiently and use it more efficiently? Neil's already touched on the salt intersection schemes, and certainly since my time at Jubilee, where I started my career in almonds, the EC has dropped from 600 units to now 200, and that is part and parcel because of the success and the implementation of the salt interception schemes. So we had a bit of a drought, and we had to review what we were doing, and along came the influence of the Murray-Darling Basin plan. We all knew for a long time, particularly us South Australians, that the river had been over-allocated. So the MBA plan is working to address that over-allocation. As my previous speaker just said, currently they're trying to recover, the original plan is trying to recover 2,750 gigalitres of water. Now there's a bit of debate going on about that now, trying to reduce it. And I can tell you, when this plan was first mooted, myself as a South Australian irrigator, and certainly a lot of us South Australian irrigators, were very, very nervous, because we'd already implemented a lot of what we thought were improvements in the infrastructure of our properties by ourselves, without government influence, etc. So we were very, very nervous that the government was going to come along and take some more water away from us as irrigators. So we formed the South Australian Communities Group, and that had the South Australian Communities Group really had representation from the border to the mouth. So we had irrigators right through South Australia sat on that committee. And we were lucky enough to have engagement with the MDBA and also government, and they listened to a lot of our concerns and implemented a lot of the concerns. Hence we ended up with our SARMS 3IP, where they gave South Australian irrigators $265 million to help us upgrade infrastructure. Currently, South Australia has flows annually of about 1,850 gigalitres. 645 gigalitres is available for irrigation. And I've got to just say, nearly half of that is now held by the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder. South Australian irrigators did agree to the changes with the plan being implemented, but with the changes, one thing we are looking for is security, particularly during future droughts. You may remember we lost a lot of our water. We were restricted down to 16% at one stage in South Australia, and that's pretty tough if you're growing permanent crops. I also want to say there's a lot of confusion. I've visited Canberra quite a few times. There's a lot of confusion between water savings and irrigation efficiencies. Everybody thinks that irrigation efficiency is save water, less water, less water, less water. Well, I want to say, from the time that I started with almonds, we used to apply about 12 megalitres of water per hectare back in the early 90s, and we struggled to produce crops of about 2.4 to 2.6 tonnes a hectare. We're now applying a little bit more. We're applying up to 14.5 megalitres, and returning an average of 3.3 to 3.6 tonnes. So for an extra 15% application of water, we're actually improved our yields by 35%, and we think we can improve that closer to 4 tonne. Anyway, as a result of the drought, the government came up with some of those schemes like the PIP and the on-farm irrigation and the SARMs. This has helped to recover water through infrastructure upgrades. And I'll just go over some of the programs that we've implemented on some of our orchards at Jubilee and Century. No worries. So what have we done? We've converted sprinkler orchards to drip orchards. We've upgraded our filter systems. So instead of them back flushing the water just out onto paddocks, we now recover that water and reuse it for irrigation. We've also upgraded our pumps to pump more efficiently, both power and also give us some flexibility. And we're currently going through a replanting phase where we're putting in new varieties, new rootstocks that are more water efficient and hopefully will give us higher production.
Last but certainly not least for this block of presentations, we have Rosie Cullen. I've seen Rosie in action before and she's great, so I'm really looking forward to this presentation. Rosie has been a volunteer in the environment since she was 9 years old. She's also been a member of the Lower Murray Rural Murray Youth Council since 2012 and is a member of the Australian Youth Climate Coalition. She is passionate. She's passionate about inspiring young people to be involved in the community and raising awareness about environmental issues. Rosie enjoys hands-on and is constantly on the lookout for opportunities to engage people through school, through the River Murray Youth Council and in her community. In 2014, so last year, Rosie received the Young Achievers Award at the South Australian Environment Awards hosted by the Conservation Council of South Australia. This was in recognition of the work she has done as an ambassador for the environment and for the River Murray Youth Council. As I said, I'm very much looking forward to hearing from Rosie. I can see that other people have cleared the stage. Perhaps I need to as well. Rosie's going to be speaking to us on a youth perspective of the River Murray management. Please make her welcome.
Can you hear me all right? Yeah. Mighty Murray River, winding through this land. Mighty Murray River, always in demand. Mighty Murray River, flowing endlessly. This mighty, muddy river, only searching to be free. There are days it seems to be that you're almost standing still, reflecting back a landscape for watching eyes to thrill. And as you catch a red sunset with sky lit like a flame, the beauty and the splendour, to you it's all the same. But day or night, it's plain to see just how much you're really worth to each and every life form living your path on earth. This mighty river, this muddy river's our Murray River. I'd like to pay my deepest respects and acknowledgement to the First River people. Thank you for having us on country. A youth perspective on the management of the Murray-Darling Basin. Where do I begin? I want you all to think of one word that best reflects an issue that you see the Murray Basin with today. It can be anything from salinity, species decline, irrigation. And while you're thinking of that, I'd like to introduce you to my little friend called Susie. Now, Susie is a young person, Jodie, pretending to be a young person. I'm sure you can use your name. I hope you've got, we'll need her later. I hope you've got your word, because on the count of 3, I want you to shout that word as loud as you possibly can. And I want you to blow the roof off. 1, 2, 3. Go. Come on. One more time. 1, 2, 3. the man in the back row, fourth chair down, had to say? No. Yeah, so basically, there's so many messages getting, and innovative ideas and solutions getting pumped out by government bodies, government organisations and environment organisations, that to young people, it's like having 200 salesmen at your front door. And basically, to Susie, it's too overwhelming. We switch off. And this is a critical point because these messages and these innovative ideas get lost. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the power of language. And to me, the language is really, really important and it can be very changing. But it's an issue when it comes to getting young people involved with natural resource management. I've been born into an environmentally conscious family, so the decision to volunteer for me was an easy one. But where to put my hours? That was a struggle for me. So, sorry, I've lost my train of thought there. Power of language, yes. So basically, Susie, hello. Susie, I hope in 20 years' time you inherit a beautiful, well-managed river system. Yeah? Now, basically, Susie's just been told that these issues don't need to be addressed right now, and that they're not going to matter for another 20 years' time. Can I just tell you, 25% of the population is under 25 years old. You've just told a quarter of the world of young people that these issues don't need to be addressed right now. And this passive and empowering language needs to stop. A few months back, my nephew Horatio, beautiful little darling, he had an absolute blast at the Murray Ridge River Wetland Day, and I can tell he's going to be a little environmentalist. And can I get you, in 15 years please, to come back to this hall and help me write a resume for me? Take his work experience, help him be on the best track he can be to become an environmentalist. Yeah? Maybe? Not sure, why not? Maybe because you don't know him and it's going to happen in 15 years' time. You're not going to act on something that's going to happen in 15 years' time. But mostly, the reason why we don't want to help him is we don't have this. I love him, he's my family. And if we don't have love, and if we don't have personal connections, change doesn't happen. Through love stems passion, and through passion stems change. And on that note, I need you all to stand up, please. Can I have everybody on your right-hand side of the room to migrate that way if you hate football? If you love football, shift over to the middle. If you sort of if you love football, if you go and see the showdowns, I want you to go to the left side of the room. And if you're not too sure about it, you go to Sunday country games. Yeah, and this side, if you hate it, if you'd rather be watching gold and beautiful, Mom, I'm not looking at you. somebody else's responsibility. Now, for me, it is so important to get people to pass this line almost of consensus, and that's where sort of everybody is right now. And once we've reached this line, it gives, via creating knowledge through education, once we've passed this line, it gives people the opportunity and to sort of, it gets people consciously thinking about what they're eating, what they're doing, and family outings, you know, go to the movies, we can go fishing. So me, it's about getting people past this line, you do that by education, head, you can do it via personal connections in your heart, creating love, which we just spoke about, and also about creating opportunities for young people to get out with your hands. Head, heart, and hands. Do you want to take a seat? Thank you. The river